Gonna be another minute. Okay. Give a few more people are coming on. We give time for people to go on. Chana, I'll give it your job this week to give me a thumbs up if you can hear me now. Okay. And now should be able to see me too. Welcome Esther Malko, welcome Raz, welcome Tzvi, welcome Teddy and Sam, welcome Chana and Dave, Esther Malka. We will give it another minute. 7:04, we'll give it till 7:05, and then we will begin. You're all on mute until the end of the service, but Lenny, it's good to see your face. Arya, Lev. Wow. I can't hear you because I'm with your wife, Lenny, asked me to use a special kind of microphone that was working best. I'm using that microphone, and when it's plugged in, I can't hear, I can only speak. So I'm sorry, I can't hear you. But at the end of the service, about 7:35, everyone will come on and wish each other good Shabbos. It's 7:05, and so we will begin at this time. And those who join us in the middle will join us in the middle. Okay. So we're going to begin with our pre-Shabbat prayer, Yedid Nefesh, and we'll begin this week with meditation number 2. When we say, we will then rejoice and be happy with you, we are referring to God's essence. The word used for you is Bach, which is the numerical value of 22, corresponding to the 22 letters of the alphabet. 22 letters of the alphabet were the building blocks with which God created the world. God's essence is contained in his words of prayer and Torah, which are comprised of 22 letters. By saying them, we connect to him. So Torah and prayer, because most of prayer comes from Torah, both words of Torah and prayer are the words of Hashem, and when we say them, we are able to connect to God's essence. So let's begin with Yedid Nefesh. Yedid Nefesh Avarachamon Mishoich Avdecha Eretz Oinecha Yarutz Avdecha K'mo Yayo Yishtachaveh Elamul Hadorecho Yerav Eloi Yedidoi Secho Minoi Fehesetzuf V'chol Toam Hador Noeh Ziv Olam Nafshi choyelas avosecho Ono Eleanor Fonolo Beharois lo Noyam Zivecho Ostis Chazek V'si Yisrapei V'hoyisalaha simchas olam. Third paragraph. V'sikyemu rachamecha v'chusana beinahu v'cha. Ki ze kamo nichsoif nichsafti lirois b'siferes ozecha eilecha meda liyibi v'chusana v'yahalti salom. Higalena uferois chavivi yolai esukas shloimecha to'ir eretz mikoidecha nagila v'nismecha b'chma'erov kiva moyed v'chanenu ki me'olam ay lay 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 ay 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 lay 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 ay 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 da da da. Ya 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 ma 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 da da ya 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 da 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 ya 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 ya. Let's read it in English. Beloved of the soul, compassionate Father, draw your servant to your will. Then your servant will hurry like a hart to bow before your majesty. To him your friendship will be sweeter than the dripping of the honeycomb and all taste. Majestic, beautiful radiance of the universe, my soul is sick for your love. Please, O God, heal her now by showing her the pleasantness of your radiance. Then she will be strengthened and healed, and eternal gladness will be hers. All worthy one, may your mercy be aroused, and please take pity on the son of your beloved, because it is so very long that I have yearned intensely to see the splendor of your strength. Only these my heart desired, so please take pity and do not conceal yourself. Please be revealed and spread upon me, my beloved, the shelter of your peace, that we may rejoice and be glad with you. Hasten, beloved, for the time has come, and show us grace as in days of old. So last week, we spoke a little bit about the building and the importance of discussing the building of the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. And we quoted two verses, the importance of the eternal commandment to make a dwelling place for Hashem, for God, and as well as the idea of the verse in Tehillim, request the welfare of Jerusalem, which means that we should actively request the welfare of Jerusalem, which we do when we talk about the laws of the building of the Beit HaMikdash. The Beit HaMikdash, I'm going to talk a little about the Beit HaMikdash, just to give people an idea of what was happening, a little bit about the size of the Beit HaMikdash, so we can get a picture of the Holy Temple. And then I'm going to share a story. So I believe you could see the cursor as I'm showing my slides. So this area here, the large area which you see, is Har HaBayit, Temple Mount. The back here is the area of the Western Wall. But I want to talk about the three sections that were in the temple. There are three sections. The first one, which is right here. The second one, which is up these stairs and behind this door here, I'll actually talk about the door. And then the second section, which is behind this door. And then the third section, which is the building itself. So the first section here is called the Ezrat Nashim. It was called the Women's Courtyard. And the reason why it was called the Women's Courtyard is because in this section there was an area for the women to stand, which was actually on a balcony, which is around the sides over here, as I'm showing with the cursor. And this area was a place where, as long as you were pure, people were able to congregate in the temple. This area was specifically known, and then I'll talk about the stairs. There were a lot of things that went on here. Each of these, there are 4 rooms on each corner, which are all very significant. One of them was a place where they stored the wood for the sacrifices, and they would have to check them to make sure that there are no worms. And I'm not going to get into all of the sections. These 15 stairs, there were 15 steps representing the 15 songs of Shir HaMa'alot, which are songs of ascent. Steps are called, are the Shir HaMa'alot. The 15 steps corresponded to those 15 Shir HaMa'alot that King David composed. There are 15 special praises or songs of ascent. And on these steps, on these 15 steps, I want to just give you an idea of how large this was. So I figured out that this area here, which is the Ezrat Nashim, the women's courtyard, was about an acre. So it's a pretty big piece right here. Each door, and I may have mentioned this last week, is 5 times of a human being. But anyway, you go up these 15 steps. On these 15 steps, the Levium, the Levites, used to stand on Sukkot during a special festival known as the Simchat Beit HaSha'eva, which was a ceremony where they would draw water, and was tremendous, tremendous joy. So much so that they would say that if anybody who did not see the joy of the Simchat Beit HaSha'eva never saw joy in their lives. There was juggling with torches, and there were lights and flames to create light. The night was lit up. It was a very beautiful, beautiful scene. And the Levites would stand on these steps and they would play instruments. And actually on the side of these steps, there are doors where they would, underneath the second section, where they would keep all these beautiful instruments. The second section is where there was the altar, and they would bring the offerings themselves. And then inside this door, which was huge, inside this door was the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKodashim, the holies and the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies was the inner sanctuary, so it was the sanctuary and the inner sanctuary where the high priest would enter into the inner sanctuary on the holiest day of the year. Inside that section, there was a menorah. There was the golden altar where they would offer incense, as well as a special shelving of bread, which they would offer as well. But we'll talk about that perhaps another time. So this is just a little bit of a understanding of what was going on in the Holy Temple, and a little bit of a visual of the Holy Temple. Now, people would bring offerings from all over. So our story is related to bringing offerings to the temple, and how, if we have a commandment to bring offerings to the temple today. Hold on, I'm moving the wrong thing, sorry. Okay. How we have an obligation, so to speak, to create a sanctuary within ourselves and to elevate ourselves to something holier, to something more spiritual. So this story takes us back about 300 years. It's the story of Rabbi Eliezer Lipa of Tarnow of Galicia. And Rabbi Eliezer Lipa was a very talented man. and did a lot of different little things. But what he was most well known for was being a water carrier. A water carrier was a very important thing back in the day. Today, water is a very important thing, but we don't need water carriers. But the water carrier was a very important part of their lives. Everybody needed water. You needed water to wash, you needed water to clean, you needed water for everything, to drink. And it was a very important thing. So the water carrier, Rebbe Eliezer Lipa, happened to be a very successful water carrier. How was he so successful? Because in the town where he lived, in Tarno, there was, maybe it was called Tarnov, there was some wealthy individuals, and he was able to sell those wealthy individuals water, and they would take very good care of him. So besides all the other people that he would provide water to, he would provide water to these wealthy individuals, and he would make a lot of money. There were other water carriers, and there was one water carrier who was a very dear friend of his. One day, Rabbi Eliezer Lipa was walking through the streets of Tarno, and as he's walking through the streets, he notices that a large group of people had gathered around what here maybe looks like a holy man, but in those days looked like a simple individual, because everybody dressed like that. And so there was a simple man who everybody seemed to be captivated by his stories, and it was none other than the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov was the founder of the Hasidic movement, and before the Baal Shem Tov led and began the Hasidic movement, he would go around from town to town. No one knew who he was, and that he was a great tzaddik, a righteous individual, and an incredible person who was able to perform miracles and give blessings and so on. But he would go around like a simple individual, and he would inspire people. He lived after many pogroms, and he wanted to uplift the people. So he'd go around from town to town, and he would share stories, uplifting stories, and allow people to feel good and to feel worthy, to feel a sense of importance. And so here was the Baal Shem Tov standing in the middle of Tarno, and he was speaking. And so our water carrier, Eliezer Lipa, he notices his friend is listening and others are listening, so he goes and joins the crowd, and he listens to the Baal Shem Tov. And the Baal Shem Tov shares the following. He says that in the time of the Holy Temple, there was a very wealthy man who decided that he is going to bring a beautiful offering to God, to the temple. He was very excited. So what did you bring? What was an offering back then? He found a bull and he brought it up to the temple. Now, I don't know if anybody ever had the experience of walking a 2 or 3-year-old child on Shabbos when you can't pick them up, and they decide on the way that they do not want to budge anymore, and they're sitting unless you pick them up, or they're not going anywhere. It's not a very pleasant experience. Now, if you're pulling a bull from somewhere in Jerusalem up to the temple, and the bull decides it's sitting down and it's not moving and it's not budging, it's a lot more difficult than your 3-year-old child. And so the story the Baal Shem Tov shares was that this wealthy individual is bringing his bull up. He wants, in those days, today we can't really appreciate it as much, obviously. It's very different. But this was a very big offering he was going to bring up to the Almighty. But his bull wouldn't budge. There was a poor man who happened to be passing by. And this poor individual, as he's passing by, he sees something, he sees a commotion. He asks, "Excuse me, what's going on?" And the guy says, I'm trying to get my bull to move, and it's not moving. The poor man had just gathered some corn for his family. And he's walking home with some corn, some stalks, whatever he had. And I don't know if it was corn or some other vegetables, some greens. And he sees that this guy has a problem. So he takes the stalks or the corn or whatever it was, and he brings it close to the nose of the bull. And of course, the bull gets up, he gives it a little to eat, and then he draws it closer away. And as he moves away, the bull gets up and starts to walk. And using a little bit of tricking the bull, so to speak, he gave it a little to eat, and then letting it follow him to get some more to eat. Eventually, didn't have much left of his corn, but the bull made it to the holy temple. That night, the poor man has a dream. And in his dream, he hears a voice. And the voice says that the offering of the poor man was far greater than that of the wealthy man. And the Baal Shem Tov went on to explain, and he says, you see, the man brought a bull, and apparently the wealthy man, after he was so excited that he was able to bring up his offering, he was so excited that he was able to finally bring up the offering, apparently he brought another offering. And he shared gifts with the priests, the Kohanim, and he celebrated with his family. He was so excited that he was able to bring up this wonderful, wonderful bull, but he went home and he had plenty left. The poor man, on the other hand, he went home with very little, if anything. And so the voice that he heard in his dream was that the mitzvah, the offering, the sacrifice that he offered, that the poor man offered, was far greater than that of the rich man. And the Baal Shem Tov explained that a mitzvah done with purity of the heart is extremely powerful. It's not how much we could do, but it's how much of our heart we're able to give. And so we can never compare what we give to someone else, what someone else gives, but whatever we do, as long as we do it with the purity of our heart, and we do the utmost that we could do, then it is meaningful, even though for someone else, it looks like, or compared to someone else, it looks like very little. Rabbi Eliezer Lipa, after hearing the story, went home, and he started to think to himself. He was inspired by the story, and he said, he was a simple man. Apparently, he wasn't a very learned man. He was a simple man, maybe just was able to read a little bit of Hebrew, which was a big accomplishment. But he certainly wasn't able to study. And he was thinking to himself, I would like to be like that poor man in the story the Baal Shem Tov shared. I would love to be able to offer something that for me is with all my heart. How can I possibly give something that's with all my heart? And so Rabbi Eliezer Lipa went home and he thought about it. And then he said to himself, I am very lucky. Rabbi Eliezer Lipa and his wife, I should mention, didn't have any children. But he was very wealthy. He was very, not wealthy, but he was very well-to-do in the sense for his needs. He had everything he needed, and the wealthy men that he would sell his water to would always take very good care of him. So he came home and he always had everything he needed. He thought to himself, my friend, who's also a water carrier, he is not as lucky as I am. He has a large family, he has other expenses and needs, and he sells his water to all the poor people in the town. And not only that, he gives his water, also sells it to the synagogues. Now, The synagogues, if you sold your water to the synagogues, you didn't make a lot of money. If anybody's ever sold anything to the synagogue, they always want a nice discount. Now they should ask for a discount. And it's your opportunity to give charity. But if you're making trying to make a living, you don't want to rely solely on a synagogue. And so Rabbi Eliezer Lipa thought to himself, if I give this poor man a few of my customers, my wealthy customers, let him go to the mansions and sell them water, and I'll go to some of the shuls instead. That will be my way of giving up something of myself for someone else. And that will be a sacrifice that I could give, just like the stalks that the man in the Baal Shem Tov story gave to God in order for the bull to make it to the temple. Rabbi Eliezer Lipa shared his thoughts with his wife, and his wife not only agreed, but she helped. And she would go down to the water with him, and they would bring water, extra water, to the synagogues, and that was their offering, to give extra to the synagogues and to others, and to give someone else an opportunity to have the money that he needed for his family. Rabbi Eliezer Lipa and his wife were blessed shortly thereafter with 2 children who became two of the greatest Hasidic sages, Hasidic masters that we know to this very day. One of them was the famous Rabbi Elimelech of Lizhensk, and the other one, Reb Zusha of Anapoli. And Rabbi Elimelech of Lizhensk and Reb Zusha of Anapoli were two incredible brothers who did more than anything else. They were known for their tremendous chesed, their kindness that they did for others through their lifetime. And this story is especially dear to me, to my family, because I always like to say this, that I was sitting one day in a shul, and someone came over to me and he said, how would you like to help the children, the descendants of Rabbi Elimelech of Lizhensk, which was one of the children? Now, it's known that if someone helps, the Rabbi Elimelech said he was a great Hasidic master and a very righteous individual. And he said that if anybody takes care of my children, my grandchildren, I will pray for them, I will bless them. So this individual asked me, I don't know who he is, who he was, and he came over to me, I was in a shul, and he said, would you like to help the children and grandchildren, the great-grandchildren of Rabbi Elimelech of Lizhensk? And my answer was that I helped the children and grandchildren of Rabbi Elimelech of Lizhensk every single day for almost 20 years. Because my wife is a direct descendant of Rabbi Elimelech of Lizhensk, and so are my children. And so this story is actually the story of Devorah's ancestors. And so that's why the story is a very warm story. And Devorah's grandfather, who was a great maybe 3 times grandchild of Rabbi Elimelech of Lizhensk, was actually, I heard this story, I read the story, I knew the story before, but someone happened to send it to me on her grandfather's birthday. Her grandfather passed away a couple of years ago, and it happened to be her birthday. And as soon as on his birthday, and as soon as I saw it, I said, "This is a story for our pre-Shabbat service." So I hope you enjoyed the service, the story. But most importantly, before we go into our Tehillim, onto our prayers and songs, I want to just say that the most important message of the story is, of course, the power of a deed done with all one's heart. And if you do, you never know. You may one day have a great grandchild like my wife Devorah. Okay. Let's do the meditation for chapter 90. We've done this chapter before, but not in a while. Chapter 90 and the next 11 chapters were written by Moses and later found by David. The theme of these chapters focuses on aspects of the exile and the final redemption. This chapter describes the weakness of a person, specifically when in exile, and how God dedicated the path of life. It concludes with a prayer to God that he redeem us from this exile. May it be speedily in our days. Every person we're doing chapter 90. Every person is a combination of the human and the divine, because our bodies are physical while our souls are godly. We must work to harmonize the two so that the holiness of the soul can illuminate and elevate even our mundane matters. Moses is the model of this harmony, bringing together the body and the soul, the physical and the spiritual. And if anybody wants to learn a little bit more about the garments of the soul, we just started a class on Monday nights. It's a 5-week Kabbalah class that started on Monday nights, where we're discussing the garments of the soul from 7:30 on Monday night. The same link as this one, if you want to join us. And so we will now read chapter 90. I'm going to read in Hebrew, and then we will read in English. Tefillah l'Moshe, Yisha Elohim Adonai, ma'onata yita lanu v'dor v'dor. V'terem arim yiladu v'atchol l'eretz v'tevel. U'me'olam ad olam ata'el. Tashev enosh ad daka v'atomer shuvu b'nei adam. Ki elef shanim beinecha ki yom etmol ki yavor ve'ashmur avalayla. Zeramton sheina yiyu baboker kechatzi yachalof. Baboker yatzitz v'chalof. La'erev yemol el v'yavesh. Ki chalinu v'yapecha v'chamatecha nifalnu. Shata avonoteinu l'negdecha alumeinu lim'or panecha. Ki chol yameinu panu v'evratecha. Ki lino shaneinu kamo hege. Yemoi shanotenu behem shivim shana. Ve'im begvurot shemonim shana. V'rabba mama v'yaven. Ki gaz chish v'naufa. Mi odeya uzapecha. Chiratecha evratecha. Limenot yameinu kinho davinavi levav v'chachma. Shuva adinai ad matai v'inachem alavodecha. Sabeinu v'aboke chastecha nuranena v'nismecha v'chol yameinu. Samcheinu kimoti nitanu shenot ra'inu ra. Yirael avodecha palecha. V'adar chal b'neihem. V'ino amadinai Eloheinu. Aleinu, O Maaseh Yadeinu konen aleinu, O Maaseh Yadeinu koneneyu. And now to the English. A prayer of Moses, the man of God. O Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Before the mountains were born, and you brought forth the earth and the inhabited world, and from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You bring man to the crushing point, and you say, return, O sons of men. For 1,000 years are in your eyes like yesterday, which passed, and a watch in the night. You carry them away as a flood. They are like a sleep in the morning, like grass, it passes away. In the morning it blossoms and passes away. In the evening it is cut off and withers. For we perish from your wrath, and from your anger we are dismayed. You have placed our iniquities before you, the sin of our youth before the light of your countenance. For all our days have passed away in your anger. We have consumed our years as a murmur. The days of our years, because of them, are 70 years. And if we have increase 80 years, but their pride is toil and pain, for it passes quickly and we fly away. Verse 11. Who knows the might of your wrath, and according to your fear is your anger? So teach the number of our days, so that we shall acquire a heart of wisdom. Return, O Lord, how long, and repent about your servants. Satiate us in the morning with your loving kindness, and let us sing praises and rejoice with all our days. Cause us to rejoice according to the days that you afflicted us, the years that we saw evil. May your works appear to your servants and your beauty to their sons. And may the pleasantness of the Lord our God be upon us, and the work of our hands established for us, and the work of our hands establish it. Let's do this song, a little joyous song, Yevarechecha Hashem Mitzion, and then we will conclude with Oseh Shalom, announce the time for the Shabbat candle lighting. It's getting earlier now, and give some charity. Yevarechecha Hashem Mitzion, Urei Betuv Yerushalayim. Yevarechecha Hashem Mitzion, Kol Yemei Chayecha. Yevarechecha Hashem Mitzion, Urei Betuv Yerushalayim. Yevarechecha Hashem Mitzion, Kol Yemei Chayecha. Orei vanim levanecha, Shalom al Yisrael. 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 May the Lord bless you from Zion and see the good of Jerusalem all the days of your life. And may you see children born to your children and see peace upon Israel. Tonight, candle lighting is at 8:07. Give some coins to charity. Please try to do so before candle lighting. And we will conclude now our service with Oseh Shalom. Oseh Shalom bimromav. O Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'yal Kol Yisrael, Ve'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom bimromav. O Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'yal Kol Yisrael, Ve'imru Amen. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. V'meru, Amen. Shabbat Shalom.